Hello and welcome to our session today on modern IT operations, bringing it all together. I'm Jason Rader and I'll be your host. And with me today, we have Juan Orlandini, who is our chief architect, and Sri Vasudevan, our senior principal in our consulting services. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Glad to have you. So conceptually, let's kick the conversation off by just defining what we're talking about when we say modern IT operations. Juan, why don't you take a swing at that?
Sure. So for us, modern IT operations is the evolutions of IT to support a developer-centric approach to running infrastructure. All right. And the reason for that is over the last decade or more, we've embarked on a journey as an industry to adopt the public cloud. And the value behind the public cloud is the velocity, the quickness of developing products and new services and those kinds of things. And what we found is that traditional IT was really hampered by its organizational structure that it had in the past. So you had your pillars around storage and maybe networking and maybe security and on and on and on. And the developer community found that very cumbersome to work with, because you'd put in a request for something, whatever that was, and it would have to go through those pillars, and then weeks or months or years later, you would get what you needed. Whereas in the public cloud, you could swipe a credit card and you had all of that stuff available and off it went and running. But that caused other issues. And for some organizations, they have a desire to maintain a data center on premises or a mandate to keep one, and they just want to gain the efficiencies that cloud-like operational model brings to the table.
Well said. Sri, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that there are four tenets to the modern IT operations conversation. The first one is it's based upon a culture change of collaboration and sharing. So the traditional divide between developers or even within the operations and infrastructure teams into pillars needs to be broken down and brought together so there's more sharing and collaboration. The second one is the critical functions such as security, operations, monitoring, measurement, those kind of things are typically bolted on post a deployment process to production, but those need to be brought in into the overall life cycle of any application deployment. So shift left in the process, if you will. And then the final point is there needs to be a culture of automate everything that's possible to be automated, especially non-administrative repetitive tasks that take a lot of time for the operations engineers typically to fight fires instead of focusing on engineering activities to make the process itself better. And all of this not only improves the developer experience, so to speak, but also creates a foundational layer so that these operations and infrastructure deployment becomes very seamless and as overall part of the deployment process.
Awesome. So it sounds like we got here because of the way the business grew and those separate kind of pillars, if you will. And now in an effort to shift left and to get everything kind of sorted out so that the folks aren't swiping that credit card to bypass certain portions of the business from a speed perspective, it sounds like we've kind of arrived at new pillars. Is that fair to say?
Well, it's focus areas. I wouldn't call them pillars because in the past, all right, there was actually distinct boundaries. So there was a storage team, and that's all. Right. Or there was a network team, and that's all they did. Right. So the new approach is to have cross-functional capabilities, but have skill areas within those cross functions. Right. So you might have a skill area around infrastructure as code, where you're literally checking in the state of your infrastructure the same way you check in the state of your application itself. The network and development ops, what we call net DevOps. Security is woven throughout the entire life cycle of all of that stuff. So it's skill areas, not necessarily pillars. So it's the way we think about it. It's make sure that we have the right skills, and if you're missing some in this area, you can identify that and skill up or skill in or whatever it is, right? But that's the right way to think about it. It's not pillars the way we organized ourselves in the past.
Understood. So let's kind of define the construct that we're talking about now, kind of going left to right, so we can talk about that shift left kind of implementation. Who wants to take a shot?
Sri, take a shot at it.
Yeah, so the developer teams, as we talked about, are deploying their applications in a continuous pipeline, continuous delivery manner as they're transforming the apps for clients. So the infrastructure deployment process has to be in a similar process, right? Integrated with that application deployment process, and through various stages of that life cycle, whether it's a continuous build process or doing a testing framework and that's automated, delivery, integration, and deployment. So infrastructure has to be provided and deployed and provisioned in the same sequence of steps so that one, it's automated and its infrastructure is code, but two, the developers can merge the infrastructure part of the coding into their code so that it's a seamless process. Now, a couple of things come out of it. One, the testing provides quicker feedback, so that if there are defects in the final product, perhaps, can be fixed and remediated, and then can be caught at various stages of this process. So they're gates, so that the applications don't go into production with a lot of defects that have to be fixed post-production. And the second thing is, it simply creates a seamless process where everything is in one package, if you will, and that is managed throughout the life cycle.
Sounds great. So who wants to enumerate kind of left to right what those columns are for us?
So pillars of expertise.
Pillars.
Right? Skills areas, right? Not organizational structures.
Understood.
So, and by the way, before I enumerate them, I want to say that we just grouped these together because they made sense for us. All right, you don't necessarily have to follow this, but having a structure like this is probably important for our clients. All right. So we start with infrastructure as code. So that's part of CI/CD and maybe some of the SRE kind of skill sets that you would need in that. So automation falls into that. Make sure that you have the right repos and you have a source code control management system, those kinds of things, right? Then you have the next one is what we call net DevOps, which is where you run your network just like you would run any other portion of the programmable infrastructure. And that means you truly know the state of your network by looking at the configuration files and automation scripts that you've written by checking them into a source code control system. So it's a different way of looking at it, right? Then the next one is security in DevOps. And Jason, you being a security person, I know that you're kind of shaking your head. So we called it out specifically as a skill area because you have to have it, right? You have to have it as a skill area that's focused, but it's important to also call out that it's something that crosses all boundaries, right? Security needs to be pervasive across the entire infrastructure, the entire development lifecycle. It just needs to be embedded in everything that you do, or there will be holes in the mechanism. Right? The final one is not the final one. The next one is what we call intelligent monitoring and SRE, and that's a working title for right now. But the important part on that one, right, is intelligent monitoring is that one of the key tenets of this modern IT ops is that you measure everything. All right, and then you react as much as you can autonomously to those events that you're monitoring. All right, so if you can detect something and automate the resolution to that, whatever it is, that is a really, really powerful thing. You're trying to get to where the automation itself handles the vast majority of your incidents and they become non-incidents, right? And then you measure how much of those you have and you start fixing things so that you lower your error rate as much as possible. And you can agree on that depending on the application, the state of the business, whatever that is. And then the final one is what we're calling application platform modernization. This is maybe you're moving to a new Java environment, you're moving to a new containerized platform, one of those kinds of things, and you just need to have the ability to make sure that you can do those migrations from the old one to the new one. All right, it's not writing the app; it's just the infrastructure that the app happens to run on top of.
All right, got it. So we've kind of qualified the different skills and products and services that need to exist across these different pillars. And back to where I kind of was talking with Sri earlier and how those things, ultimately what you're trying to do is shift left with components of each of these when it's appropriate for the engagement that we're talking about or the maturity that we're trying to work with an organization with.
Yeah, and that shift left term, it's important that we make sure everybody's aware of what that means. That's getting it closer and closer to the developer itself. So the developer is more and more familiar with those capabilities, and it's built into their DNA at some point, right? Because when you shift right, you're stepping away from the developer, and then that's when you start getting those disconnects, which is where we work, right? A strong disconnect between the developer and the operations team.
Shri, any final words related to this topic as far as the way that we've kind of categorized it out?
I think there's a couple of things to note here, right? So a lot of customers in their journey may think about automation and orchestration, but they are doing a point solution, or they're deploying certain aspects of their infrastructure stack or application stack in automated fashion. But the idea of infrastructure as code includes the entire end-to-end process. That includes data protection, for example, or we talked about security. We need to integrate with the operating or monitoring, real-time monitoring systems, so those measurements are built into this process. So and network obviously is a key component of all of this, right? So it's an end-to-end automation, and so that infrastructure stacks can be deployed along with the application stack, like I said, in one continuous manner.
So I'm sorry, Shri, there's a very important thing in there that you mentioned that we need to make sure that we call out, all right? So in the past, when we created automation, it was to make operations life easier, all right? So when we created private clouds, the first versions of private clouds, I was guilty of doing this. I made it super easy to build a VM, but that really didn't solve the developer's problem. They needed a full stack of tools in order to do their job, all right? And what we're really talking about is automating the end state, which is the developer consuming the infrastructure, right? So that provides the end-to-end life cycle of application development tooling so that they can do their job, right? And it's a different view, it's a slightly different view, but that ends up driving all of these things that Shri mentioned.
Oh, fantastic. I think, again, this is, as we all take this journey into the next generation of, modern IT operations, this process is, probably be refined over the course of the next few years. But I think, you're taking a complex environment with a lot of potential, iterations within an organization and categorizing those into the right skill sets, the right services that need to exist. And then again, helping folks understand the importance of including these, who their internal clients are, and those types of things. I think it's a great step in the direction to help, from a thought leadership perspective, help folks understand kind of how to tackle this problem. Thanks so much, gentlemen, for your time today. And I'm sure we'll be back with some more information on these topics specifically as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.